Hey, converted man here. So, why the puddle analogy against God fails miserably by capturing Christianity. Oh, good. This should be interesting. So, I'm going to start with the argument that he thinks is really good for the fine-tuning argument. Like, he thinks that this argument is like the best version of this argument. And there it is well, let me point the other way. On the screen, right there. There it is. Let's go ahead and just zoom in there. I'll read it off. 1. The probability that a universe would be life-permitting given naturalism is very, very low. 2. The probability that a universe would be life-permitting given theism is not very, very low. 3. The fact that a universe is life-permitting provides evidence for theism over naturalism. Wow. That's neither valid nor sound. So valid is the construction of the argument itself. P1, P2, C. Premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. Now you can write it out as premise 1, premise 2, and conclusion, or you can write it as P1, P2, C. But that's it. That's how you do it. Not 1, 2, 3. 3 is not conclusion. Okay, so that's just a formal fallacy, Okay, fine. What about the first premise? Well, this is a bald assertion that has no argument for it. This needs its own independent argument to show that it's the case. What are you basing this idea on? How do you know what the likelihood of anything is? Based upon what? What system are you utilizing? This is meaningless statistics. This is a bald assertion. This needs its own separate argument. Number 2, that the probability of a universe being life-permitting given theism is not very, very low. How do you know that? What do you mean by that? Like, given theism, what does that mean? I mean, that's just kind of an incoherent statement, because theism is a broad term that covers many ideas. So there's certainly concepts of God that don't involve that God making the universe or caring about the universe or whatever. So even if there's a God, that doesn't mean that there's a life-permitting universe. Maybe the God doesn't care about life. And where are you getting this probability from? What's your measurement? How did you arrive at this conclusion? This is another bald assertion with no citation, no anything to back it up. It would need its own argument in full to support it. And then the conclusion, which is not written as a conclusion, but it should be the conclusion. The fact, which has not been established as a fact, that a universe is life-permitting provides evidence for theism over naturalism, does not follow. Okay, so reducing this to its components, A is B. Let's see. Probability would be A. B is naturalism, so A, B. A, C, and yeah, therefore, yeah, I mean, it doesn't work. Let me take a screenshot of this, because Yeah, see, doing live is very difficult because I have to think about, the thing that I'm analyzing. But I wanted to explore if I could do an analysis live. So this is what this is now. We'll see if it, if it pans out, and if not, I can always delete the damn thing. Let's see. Let's go ahead and share the other screen that I want to share. Okay. All right. And yeah, okay. So let's see. Let me just reduce this to its component bits here. So opaque. All right. So P U L N. Let's see. P U L T. So U L T. Yeah, that's pretty damn broken. So for the probability with the universe is life permitting is less with this. It's greater with that. And therefore it's that. It's just really bad. It's very clunky because you want A, B, B to C, and therefore C. You want a flow here, and this is not flowing very well. So it's extraordinarily clunkily written. So that's an issue. All right, back to the other thingy here. Whoopsie. Okay, there's the thing. All right, let's share the screen of the Chrome tab. Why the puddle analogy fails. And this is another interesting thing with this particular thing. Seems to be kind of making a comeback for people talking about the puddle analogy. This is not an argument. The puddle analogy isn't an argument. It's just an analogy. It's just a way to understand the problem with thinking that the universe is fine-tuned for life. Life will find, if a universe can have life, then it will. And so, of course, life will find itself in a life-permitting universe. Duh. So there's no likelihood that you can assign to that. There's no percentages. There's no anything that you can assign to that. What they try to do is say fine-tuning, that there's these variables that if they were off, then life wouldn't be possible. But that's not exactly what fine-tuning is actually saying, because they don't care about science. They just want to do apologetics. What fine-tuning is actually saying that if these things were off, then the type of life that we are would not be possible. That doesn't mean that other life wouldn't be possible. It doesn't mean that some other thing wouldn't develop. We don't have any idea. I've not seen anyone have, say, a computer simulation that shows the universe with the parameters we know, coming, from the initial state into what we have now, and then saying, okay, now that we've got a program that can do that, and that it gets from here to there successfully with just, I don't know what it would need programmed into it to be able to do that, but then you go, okay, well, let's change the parameter here, like 1 point off, and then run it again and see what happens. Does any life develop? Or could the computer even figure that out? Because we haven't figured out whether or not other types of life are possible or plausible. We know that our type of life is, so we are looking for that, but we don't know if other life is out there, like maybe silicon-based life or something like that. We don't have any idea. So this relies completely on our own ignorance about what life is or could be, to then say, well, we're so amazingly special that means something. All right, so let's go on with his video, because I mean, that's just, he has some stuff before, but it's not really relevant. He's like, even atheists agree with that this is the best argument, and then he like has 2 atheists or 3 that agree, that said something about this being a good argument. It's like, wow, yeah, that must, who cares? Well, it would if you had the actual statistics to back up 1 and 2. You don't, so it doesn't follow. It's a non sequitur. And if you actually knew or understood logic, you would have recognized how bad this argument is, especially in the format that you're providing. Well, let's see if he gets that right, just for fun. Yeah, not really. Oh, good. Where'd you get it from? See, number 3 at this website. Okay, let's see. Fine-tuning website. Wow. So basically, some dudes, they have some papers. Have they been cited by anything? No. Probably not. Who's this guy? Robin Collins. Who's this? Let's see. Who's Robert Collins? Let's see. International Medicine. Wait, that can't be it. All right. Let's see. Fine tuning. Let's see. Robert Collins. Who are you? American philosopher. Prominent advocate. Okay, so he's a philosopher. He's not a scientist. I don't care what he has to say about this. That was an interesting rabbit hole. Back to the video. Okay, can't hear the video I'm responding to. Let me crank the volume on that and see if that helps anything here. Okay, that's all the way up. Can you hear it? Okay, can it be heard now, or should I panic? And let's go back a bit. Main gun. This should be good. Can you hear it now, though? Hear me, but not the video. Okay, that's... Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. Let's try this. I didn't check the share audio. Yeah, well, that's all right. We didn't really miss much. I'll go back though. Well, this is a train wreck, isn't it? Oh,
likelihood principle. If you want to learn more about the likelihood principle, check the description for more details. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular version of the fine-tuning argument, then make sure to check the description. I've linked exactly where I got it from. And by the way, I should mention that I'll be pointing you to the description of this video a lot, so just make sure to check it out at some point. Now, before we actually get into the puddle analogy, let me go ahead and give you a quick defense of both premises in my argument. So the fact that our universe permits the evolution of embodied conscious creatures is actually pretty puzzling. Imagine for a moment that there was no such thing as gravity. Do you think...
What? Okay, now let's, well, now it sounds okay. Okay, great. Okay, so now that if people can hear what this guy is saying, now I can play this and do a thing.
So just make sure to check it out at some point. Now, before we actually get into the puddle analogy, let me go ahead and give you a quick defense of both premises in my argument. So the fact that our universe permits the evolution of embodied conscious creatures is actually pretty puzzling. Imagine for a moment that there was no such thing as gravity. Do you think that people like us or any creatures at all could evolve in such a universe?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, like us, probably not, but some other type of life, who knows? And I'm not even sure that a universe could be without gravity, but who knows? Maybe it could be. But this kind of goes against the whole God thing. If God can do anything, then certainly it could have a universe without gravity and yet have creatures exist in that universe. See, the thing is, to point to all the rules that currently exist in the universe and say, well, that has, I mean, wow, that has to mean that there's God, basically says that God is constrained by the laws of the universe that it made. It could have made the universe in any way that it wanted and have life there, that even if it doesn't make any sense for the life to be there. The universe could be completely and wholly non-life permitting, in which that we find ourselves in this weird universe where we're just floating around existing and radiation is everywhere, and yet we're just fine. And it doesn't have to make sense. But why do any of that when God could just make us in its universe, whatever that is, you know, just have us there with God, just be revealed. Why this hide and seek game where God makes a universe and it's like, okay, but now I'm going to go hide so you can't see me. You know, it's just incoherent at its core, but whatever. Let's hear what your defense is. So far, it's not very good.
Answer is no. There wouldn't even be planets. Matter.
Well, okay, there wouldn't even be planets. Well, without gravity, I don't know. Maybe there would be. How do you know? Do you have a model of this sort of universe? How do you extrapolate this idea?
Would just kind of be floating around everywhere. There'd be no stars, no atmospheres, nothing at all resembling what we see here in our universe.
How do you know that? Have you run any simulation to show that this is true?
No part of our universe would be dense enough to be in the solid phase of matter, so nothing in our universe could be a kind of information storing device. Life needs gravity. But we can't just have gravity. We got to have gravity at the right strength.
But why does life need gravity? See, gravity exists whether there's life or not, right? It's not like the life is first and then the gravity is made so that the life can be there. It's that the gravity exists whether or not there's any life. Yeah, the Earth is 4.54 billion years old, and the universe is about 13 billion years old. So 4 minus 13, 13, 12, 10, 9. So, you know, it's got like about 9 billion years where just life, at least that we know about, doesn't exist. Is all that time God preparing for the Earth to exist? Why is all that time required to get things in such a way that life can develop? Again, this is a very good argument for naturalism because, yeah, the fact that gravity exists allows for other things to exist in the way that they do. If things were different, things would be different. And the sort of universe we have would be a different universe. And we'd be sitting there saying, well, this is a weird universe. How do we explain this universe? It'd be the same thing. But we only have one example of a universe. And so, yes, gravity is a thing in this only example of a universe that we have. That's it. Life forms because it can, not because the universe intended for life to form.
The gravitational constant in Newton's equation was any larger, then the universe would have just sort of collapsed back in on itself almost immediately after the Big Bang. And if the constant were any weaker, then matter never would have coalesced into planets or stars or anything like we see in our universe.
It's interesting to say that, but where's the proof of that?
Have just sort of all expanded into nothingness. So not only do we need a universal attractive force like gravity, it has to be set at the exact right strength. Physicists have estimated that the gravitational constant is fine-tuned to 60 decimal places. Any deviation on either side of that would result in a lifeless universe. Now,
and again, now he says physicists have done this. Citation, you have citations for other things, but not for that. Not for the physicists to the degree, not for their papers, not for anything, not who their names are or where you can find this information, nothing. Just your own assertion that this is true. So, and you know, when I hear these numbers, I go, well, where is that number coming from? No citation given. So why should I believe you?
Now, gravity is just one relatively easy to understand example. If you want to see a longer discussion about all the evidence for fine-tuning, check out the description. I've linked there another conversation I had with an actual cosmologist about all the evidence for fine-tuning. So,
well, that would be interesting. I wonder if that cosmologist is actually credible or not, or if they're just another theist. Let's see. The cosmologist explains why the universe is fine-tuned for life. Dr. Luke Barnes. Let's look up Dr. Luke Barnes and see what his deal is. He works on cosmology. Okay. So he's a Christian astrophysicist. I wonder how many citations he has or how many things that he has published, because typically with these Christian scientists, they fail in science so that they therefore go to apologetics to get money because they failed in their career. So I speculate if we were to look further into Dr. Luke Barnes, that we would find that he has very little publications of interest or a very successful scientific career. Yeah, stars couldn't form without gravity. Yeah, again, it might be completely true, but what I'm harping on is there's no citation that he's giving us to think that it's true. He's just saying it, just asserting it, it's not good enough.
So the question for us is, given that the universe didn't have to be this way, why is it this way?
How do we know that the universe didn't have to be this way? Like, what's that based on? These why questions are also not ones that are necessarily even coherent in the first place. Why is that rock in the middle of the forest? Is it there so that the bear can scratch its back, or is it just there and that's it? Well, it's just there. There isn't a why to it. It's just there. There isn't any more reason for it. So let's go back to the whole gravity thing. Okay, so if there wasn't gravity in this certain constraint, then the universe could not form. Let's just grant that, tentatively speaking. Okay, so gravity isn't right. The universe starts to go, and then it just collapses in on itself. All right, well, then we don't have a universe. Well, we don't have that universe. But whatever allowed the universe to be starts up again. And this time, gravity is almost there, but it's not quite right, and it collapses again. And at some point, eventually, gravity is just right, and the universe comes into being. So the only way for the universe to actually be would then be the way it is, at least for that particular constant. But that only makes sense in terms that physics cannot be different. Like, this is the only way things could be. Let's just say that as a tentative thing, although I don't know that that's true. But that only works if things are constrained by the rule set, which doesn't have to be any rules if there's a God. A God can make a ruleless universe that still works, and that would be more hint that there's a God than one that functions only because these rules exist, these laws exist. The universe, if it has to be this way, has to be this way because it couldn't be some other way. So the answer to this question is because any other universe wouldn't form at all, or it would form, but it wouldn't be able to contain life. Thus, we wouldn't be there to wonder about it.
Why does it support life? What's the explanation?
That's a huge jump. Why does it support life? Because it can. That's why.
Naturalism, the view that nothing like God exists, it's actually pretty surprising that life would exist. And that's
not really. I mean, given the parameters that we have, it might be that life is inevitable as a result of the various chemicals and laws of the universe. That given enough planets and enough stars, that eventually life would be inescapable as occurring. That could be a possibility.
Because there are just vastly more ways to get a universe that can't permit life than to get a universe that can permit life. It's therefore very, 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 very improbable that life would exist given naturalism. No,
that doesn't follow, though. Why is it improbable given naturalism? That some other universe, if it existed, that wasn't able to have life, there would be no life there to wonder about itself. This is stupid. You're going backwards about it. The weak anthropic principle, as it's called, is essentially that, where any universe, any area where you will find where life could happen, is the only place where life would then go, well, this is interesting, why am I here? And there might not be an answer to the why, but there might be an answer to the how. And the likelihood that life would develop is not something you can measure. It's not something that you can put a percentage on, because you don't have any other models of different universes that all show that every single type of universe that could be doesn't produce life. That this is the only type of universe that produces life. Where's all those models? You don't have that. So we only have the one example. We know life is here because here we are. There's no way to assign any probability to that. And naturalism completely explains, well, not all the things, but almost all the things at any rate, to my satisfaction. But essentially, what he's doing is appealing to personal incredulity. Well, it's just so unlikely. Why? Because you can't understand how it could be. Right. Yeah.
There's a lot more to say here, but this is just a very quick defense of my first premise. No.
Wow, what a really piss poor defense of your first premise. At no point do you give any citations. You don't show us how you got any of the statistics that you would have to be able to make the statement that you made. So this is meaningless statistics hidden within this bald assertion that you haven't supported at all.
Now, on the other hand, life is not so improbable on theism. God has a particular reason to create us because we are embodied moral agents.
How do you know what God wants or doesn't want at all? How do you even know that there's a God at all? This is mere speculation at best, bald assertions, and unargued for conclusions at worst. The universe is so fine-tuned for life that life is only on this one planet rather than everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the theists want their cake and eat it too, and the cake is a lie. Where, well, we're so special because we're the only thing that's around on this little planet. Also, the universe is fine-tuned for life. Huh? What? Not like that. Yeah.
We basically have the ability to make moral choices. We can choose between right and wrong. We have.
Can we though? Like, can we really choose between? Like, some people can't. Like, some people don't even understand the concept of right and wrong. This is one huge red herring from your argument in full.
Have the ability to harm people, but we can also use our freedom in order to do good things and exemplify goods like compassion, love, forgiveness, and that type of thing. So it's not incredibly surprising that God would have reason or would want to create a universe that can support embodied conscious creatures like us that have the ability to make moral choices.
Why? Why would God do any of that, though? Why would it care? Why would it make any creatures at all? Why would it make anything? That's an unanswered question, I think. Theism can't hope to answer, because if they posit a perfect being, and the definition of perfect is what the broad definition of perfect being, without flaw, without any thing needed. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't want anything. It's not lacking, So a perfect being wouldn't have needs because it's already got everything it needs. It wouldn't have any desires or wants. It wouldn't have any motive to create anything else because it's got everything that it already has. But the Christian concept of God is not really a perfect being because it doesn't have everything that it needs, because it needs a relationship. Although it depends on the theology. Some will say that God created humans for our benefit, not its benefit, and that creating people is an act of love and all this sort of stuff. But it just means that God's not really perfect, even though they're going to keep asserting that it's perfect because that's what they think God is. But then the word perfect changes, so why use it?
So even though universes that can't permit life vastly outnumber universes that can permit life, it's not so unlikely or so unexpected that God would want to choose and select a universe that can permit life.
How do we know how many universes can't permit life without the models? Show me something. Don't just say that this is true. Prove it. But why would God need to make the universe capable of supporting life It's God. It can do anything. It can make a universe that makes no sense and have life there anyways. This is incoherent. If, and of course, this is, if we tentatively grant some of Christian ideas, we've got a realm called heaven where God exists, apparently, and where your immortal soul will one day go dwell, if you believed in the right stuff, at any rate. So why not just make us in that universe, in that reality? Why make us in this mortal coil at all? Why bother with the physical universe when you already have this other universe, state, whatever you want to call it, that's non-physical, where everyone would know that there's a God without question or doubts?
It's a quick defensive premise too. So think of it like this. Here's an analogy.
Oh, good. You don't like the puddle analogy, so you're going to give your own analogy. Wonderful.
There's billions and trillions of ways to combine different chunks of metal and plastic. Now, it's certainly possible to organize these materials into a Ferrari, but just sort of like throwing them together by chance, you're probably not going to get anything that resembles a car, much less.
Really? Really? This bad, broken analogy. The windmill, the hurricane in the junkyard. How many times have we heard this? You don't understand how things really work at all. It's not just chance. There's a filtering mechanism on all the things. There's a filtering. You already said the universe is, in fact, a filtered mechanism. That the universe that we know about, at any rate, can't be without gravity in a certain constant. Okay, great, fine, sure, whatever. You didn't prove that, but we'll just tentatively grant that. All right, great. So we already have one filtering mechanism. Then there's another filtering mechanism with how stars form and how that, and then how planets form because of the stars, and how different chemicals form because of the stars exploding and spreading out these chemicals into the universe that then get together because of gravity and make new planets. And yet that is all chance, because you're going to just ignore all the filtering mechanisms that you already have to have in order to get to the result that we currently have. Brilliant.
Less a Ferrari or sports car. To get a Ferrari, you need someone to intentionally select what to make out of all the possible combinations. By the way, this is what a good analogy looks like.
No, that's like the stupidest analogy ever. And the fact that you don't comprehend why that analogy utterly fails on every single conceivable level just speaks volumes. All I need to know about your apologetics is right there, that you think that analogy is a good one. Okay. It's more like the metals and plastic are falling through let's have to imagine a very big planet for this to work, but okay. So they're falling through the air, and on the way down, they're hitting pieces of rock that are there that bend the metal this way and that way, and then the other rocks are hitting them this way, and there's heat being blasted from volcanoes in certain parts, and that's melting them together, and as they fall and they continue to fall, and then they get to the bottom, by the time they get to the bottom, you have a fully formed vehicle that came about because of all these filtering mechanisms before it that were in just the right configuration to do that. Now, that's a bit out there, but that's more closer to the analogy of how things are than your stupid analogy. So it's the watchmaker argument. That's all it is. The freaking watchmaker analogy. Golly.
So from the first two premises of my argument, it follows that a life-permitting universe provides pretty good evidence for theism over naturalism.
Not at all.
That's the fine-tuning argument. My favorite version of the fine-tuning argument in a nutshell. Right, so now let's turn to the puddle analogy and get clear, first of all, on exactly what it is, what it's supposed to be saying. The puddle analogy was made famous by an English author named Douglas Adams. He's actually the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I haven't read the book. I hear it's really good, but I actually really like the movie.
Why haven't you read the book? Oh, okay, whatever.
He's obviously a very, very talented writer, and he just seems like a really brilliant guy. So here's a clip of him actually giving the analogy.
And it's rather like a puddle waking up one morning. I know they don't normally do this, but allow me, I'm a science fiction writer. A puddle wakes up one morning and thinks, this is a very interesting world I find myself in. It fits me very neatly. In fact, it fits me so neatly. I mean, really precise, isn't it? It must have been made to have me in it. And the sun rises and is continuing to narrate the story about this hole being made to have him in it. And the sun rises, and gradually the puddle is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time the puddle ceases to exist, it's still thinking, it's still trapped in this idea that the hole was there for it. And if we think the world is here for us, we will continue to destroy it in the way that we've been destroying it.
Now, it seems to me that Adam's original point is something like this. As our environment gets worse and worse and worse, or in other words, as the puddle continues to shrink, then we don't really care. Everything's okay because it was designed for us. What's unique about this interpretation is that atheists are very rarely using the puddle analogy as a reason to care about the environment. But that's
critical analysis is a thing that you should learn here. There are two different things, the analogy and then the follow-up to that analogy, which is a completely different and distinct thing from the analogy itself, which is, again, it's not an argument. It's simply saying that the puddle, the life, doesn't realize that the hole is not there for it. That hole was always there. Then the part about that as everything dries up, it's too focused on thinking about how awesome, the hole has been made for it, that it doesn't see that it's drying up. There's completely two different things, two different ideas there. But yeah, if the universe is designed for us, or if the earth is designed for us, then why should we care about the environment? It's made for us.
Seems to be exactly what Adams was getting at, right?
Wow.
He's talking about a puddle getting smaller and smaller. So call this interpretation 1, environmentalism. A second, more popular interpretation of the puddle analogy is that just because something appears designed to you doesn't mean that it's actually designed. Call this
that is the 2 is right. The first one relies on you not being able to differentiate between one idea and then another idea that a person presented, and the analogy in and of itself, which is what you're trying to argue against. Why you would be arguing against an analogy, I don't know, because an analogy isn't an argument in the first place. But whatever. Appearances can be deceiving. That's not exactly what it's going for either. It's that the appearance of design doesn't mean design. So I guess, yeah.
Interpretation 2, appearances can be deceiving. This is the interpretation that Drew over at Genetically Modified Skeptic seems to endorse in the following clip.
The analogy directly acknowledges that the universe appears designed, and it poses an explanation for why that appearance is deceiving. The analogy just shifts perspectives. That the universe and that we in our evolution came to exist as a creature which fits its pre-existing environment.
Now here, Drew actually admits that the analogy acknowledges that the universe appears designed, but appearances can be deceiving. For Drew, the puddle analogy is meant to get us to consider the possibility that we were shaped to live in our environment rather than the other way around, rather the environment being created for us. A third interpretation of the puddle analogy is that it's really like arrogance or self-centeredness that makes us conclude or infer that the universe was designed for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair too. I think it is rather arrogant and petty to think that the entire universe was made with us in mind. I'm a little bit more humble than that. The universe was fine before I existed and will be fine after I stop existing. The universe doesn't need us. It doesn't even know that we're a thing. Humanity is a teeny tiny speck, a little tiny pale blue dot. And on that tiny blue dot is some land where some humans can live and some land that humans can't live on, or I guess they could live on it, but it's pretty hard to live on it. So yeah, the scale of things, to think that everything is made for you, is just wonky and rather arrogant. But that's essentially what Christianity kind of says, is that everything was made with you in mind, rather than everything was made and you came along just because you could.
The world is just so beautiful. I'm just so amazing. I'm so arrogant, and the world must have been designed for me.
Yeah.
Arrogance, self-centeredness prevents us from considering the possibility that the universe wasn't created especially for us.
Right.
Call this interpretation 3, arrogantly designed. A fourth interpretation of the analogy is that life was shaped by the conditions of our universe, but different life might emerge in universes with different conditions. Just as puddles
I said that earlier.
Take the shape of their container, life takes the shape of its environment. Call this interpretation 4, different universe, different life. A fifth interpretation of the puddle analogy is that just like the puddle could only observe the shape that it takes, life can only observe a life-permitting universe. If the universe couldn't permit...
Yeah, that's the weak anthropic principle.
Life, then obviously we wouldn't be here thinking about it.
Yeah.
Our observations, in other words, necessitate a life-permitting universe. The puddle shouldn't be drawing conclusions about why it takes the shape that it does. It has to take that shape. Likewise, life shouldn't be asking, why does the universe have life? It has to have life. Call this interpretation 5, life is necessary. Now, let's just sort of take note of what's happened so far. We've looked at 5 different interpretations of the puddle analogy. 5. That's not a good sign. Analogy.
What? Why? Why is that not a good sign? Do you not understand critical analysis? Like, okay, well, whatever. Let's see what he has to say.
Analogies are not supposed to be ambiguous. They're supposed to be clear. And
analogies are not supposed to be ambiguous. Okay, well, that goes most of the Bible then, because most of the Bible is built on analogy. That it's extraordinarily ambiguous. So, oh well. It's like he doesn't even
obvious. I mean, that's why we use analogies. They're supposed to make a very, very clear point. But the true point of the puddle analogy is elusive. No,
it's not really. That you can extrapolate more from it is part of critical analysis, which you kind of did, but you screwed up. Number 1, you screwed up. The other ones are fine. But okay, I guess I could stretch it enough to think that number 1 is an extraction you can make. But during critical analysis, you can look at anything and extract all sorts of ideas from it, whether it's an analogy or not. And that's a good thing to do because you can get more perspective on that idea that you're thinking about or examining. So you're basically saying because it can be done, because you can do critical analysis on it, therefore it's invalid. Well, then I guess everything's invalid because we can do critical analysis on everything. So this just kind of proves to me that you don't understand, well, if not logic, then I guess critical analysis, which you've been using. The analogy is pretty darn clear in its initial state. And it is that, that the hole is not made for the puddle fills the hole. That's it. The water fills the hole, and that's what makes it a puddle. Or, that the hole is always there, and the water didn't have to be there to fill it. That's it. It's very easy to understand. If you extrapolate and you analyze it and you critically analyze it, yes, you can get all these other ideas from it, but that doesn't negate it. It only makes it more interesting. So I just can't.
Like literally no one, not even the atheists that I've asked about this, can agree on what the point of the puddle analogy is. And
that also doesn't really mean anything as far as having people agree on what it means. But then that kind of goes again to the Bible. Nobody can really agree on what that means either. So does that make it false? Does lack of agreement upon analogy make the analogy false or useless? If that's the case, if that's what you're driving at, then most of the Bible is useless. Good job.
And my prediction is that even though I've tried to be literally as charitable as possible in addressing the puddle analogy, I'm still going to get people telling me that I just don't understand it. I haven't considered this other interpretation of the puddle analogy. This is not a good sign. If no one can understand the point that you're trying to make, maybe you don't really understand the point that you're trying to make.
Or what? Or maybe you don't understand anything at all. It's just, how about that for an idea? That's possible. Get back to work. Wow. So again, he's just kind of debunked most of the Bible for us. Good job there, capturing Christianity.
So 2 more quick points here is that the puddle analogy is probably not something that people have analyzed at this depth. So
no, people have analyzed it. And the fact that people disagree about what it means that people analyzed it. You're a nitwit.
So hearing me analyze it and draw out different interpretations is probably going to seem at odds with their intuitions about it. That's fine. This level of analysis is meant to do that. It's meant to draw out the reasoning explicitly so that we can take a closer look at it. That's sort of what analytic philosophy is all about. The second point is that a lot of people will want to combine different interpretations of the puddle analogy, and that's also fine. Like if you think that interpretations 3, 4, and 5 are the main point of the analogy, that's okay. I've just split the reasoning out so that we can all see it explicitly. All right, so now let's analyze these 5 different interpretations and see what can be said about them. The first...
No, let's not do that. Let's just not, because it's pretty clear to me at this point that this guy doesn't, how do I put this without implying I know what he's thinking? Either he doesn't understand critical analysis or doesn't care, something like that. Being able to extrapolate all these ideas from an analogy is just fine. That's one. Secondly, the analogy is not, again, it's not an argument. It is a way to understand why the fine-tuning thing isn't really an argument in the first place. And there's other rebuttals to the fine-tuning. In fact, I already gave one when you showed your argument. There's plenty of ways to rebuttal all of that because you didn't cite anything to support any of your premises, plus the form is bad, plus, you know, we just the meaningless statistics, bald assertions that you have already negate the argument as something that we would investigate. We have to be skeptical of your conclusion because your argument is flawed. So we don't need the analogy. The analogy is just there to make it, to boil it down to the bare bones essence of it and say, well, look, you know, this is one way to think about it. There's other ways to think about it. There's other analogies to be made. I guess if you want to go over every single bit, you know, you can. I'm not gonna. I'm kind of done with you at this point. Let's see. What else? Oh, he goes to what the Bible says. Really? I don't care what Genesis supposedly explains or doesn't. No, it doesn't really explain that humans are held accountable as stewards over the earth because we're given it's ambiguous what it says. So I'm using your own argument against you. That the analogies of Genesis can be looked at in multiple ways, therefore it's invalid. So there you go. And it also says that you can basically do whatever the bleep you want with animals because they're yours to do with whatever you want. So yeah. What about Revelation? Revelation says that God will punish destroyers of the earth. Yeah, but Revelation's about King Nero, so whatever. Numbers instructs us to keep the land pure, whatever. So what? I don't. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what the Bible says. I mean, sometimes it gets things right, but that doesn't mean that it's all right. So what a leap from this bad fine-tuning to the Bible. Just wow. So yeah. In my experience, with this many logical fallacies, the argument's not going to suddenly magically fix itself. So I think I'm kind of done at this point with this video, at least for the live response to it. Now, if you, whoever you might be, want me to break down the logical fallacies that he performs throughout the video and have an edited video where I go into more detail on all this stuff, and maybe it will be longer or maybe it will be shorter than what I'm doing right now, let me know in chat. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see me do this non-live, and I will. If enough people say to do it, and if I feel like it. So I probably will, maybe. But if you tell me to, then that probability might go up. That's how you do probability arguments. Yeah. Anyways, I guess I'm done with this guy. So, thanks for watching. We'll eat more people with logic. Let's see. Did we have empirical evidence? No, we didn't have any empirical evidence. None was offered to support any of his notions about cosmology. Not a single citation of the physicists that agree with whatever it is he thinks that they agree with. We have no repeatable tests. We only have one universe. We don't have him producing simulations of other universes to examine. So there's no testing at all cited for any of these ideas. Those tests would enhance the argument at hand. So why not get some computer simulations going? And as far as a valid and sound argument, well, it's not valid because it was formatted badly, and it's not sound because none of your premises were actually argued for. And they have multiple logical fallacies, and the formatting is so bad that it actually breaks the argument even more and acquires more logical fallacies because of it. So, no, we don't have a valid and sound argument. And unless and until we do, we have to be skeptical of the conclusions. All right. What else is on YouTube? Oh, I should end this at this point. So, thanks for watching. Be a lobster. I don't know. Whatever.